Rick, just to start, what was the name of the puppy that just was barking in the background?
Well, we have two Bichons. We've had
Okay.
them over the years. One is 17 years old, which is kind of on final approach, and we always bring one in 2.0 to
Two.
be ready. So we have Jasmine is the 1 year old puppy, and Magnolia was the older dog. These dogs aren't really dogs if you know Bichons. They're like 8 or 9 pounds. That I call them designer dogs.
Yeah.
They sleep with us, and their feet never touch the ground. And the neighbors say that the way my wife loves on them, they hope when they die they can come back reincarnated as my wife's dog because they're treated so
So
well.
well. Well, it sounds like Magnolia's personality might live on.
Right, right, right.
A little bit. Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here today. I wanted to. I feel like DentaMetrix as a software is such a powerful tool. Um, I've closed more than a few deals now, and you've been a great help with that. And I know that DentaMetrix is a professional strength software when it comes to reporting, but I still think that it's worth showing it to a larger audience. So that more people can understand the value that they can
Right,
derive, and also the tools that are within it that can help practice owners increase the value of their practices as well.
right. And on the other end of the spectrum, we probably shut down about $20 million worth of flaky deals where we discovered some fraudulent activity or obvious overtreatment and double billing to insurance companies and things like that. So it works both ways.
So it can work for a seller and for a buyer, is what you're saying.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um,
We have a number of advisors like you or dental CPAs or other professionals who specialize on the buyer representation side. And so that's why I'm telling folks who are typical advisors and brokers from the seller side that your sellers need to be getting more sophisticated because the buyers are. They're going to ask a lot more in-depth questions rather than give me 10 years worth of tax returns and how much did you collect last year.
yeah, that is true. I have felt that myself, and really, Denometrics has been great in helping me answer the questions. Um, just to begin on how you began Denometrics, I'd like to just give everybody a little bit of background in like your formal education
Right.
and the other organizations that you've been a part of because it's a lot. It goes back a long way and it's in depth and it covers all the bases here too.
Yeah. So I've got a really interesting background that brings a number of appropriate skills to bear here. Um, I have an electrical engineering degree from Georgia Tech, but I went through what they call the co-op program, where you work 3 months and go to school 3 months and essentially take 5 years to graduate. And I worked at the fascinating Savannah River plant you're familiar with in South Carolina, the
Yes, sir.
nuclear facility near Aiken, South
Hmm.
Carolina, North Augusta, etc. And after having gone through some of that and realizing that about the junior year in electrical engineering, they stopped talking English and started talking math. And I said, this may not be a lot of fun. So I decided I didn't want to be an engineer, but I was already too far into the program to quit and change over to underwater basket weaving or whatever. So I went ahead and finished the engineering. And I had to go 2 years in the Navy, and I was a communications officer on a destroyer. And when I got there, the captain said, Mr. Willeford, you're the junior officer on staff here. You are now the treasurer of the officers' mess. I said, yes, sir, whatever that meant. And so he handed me this ledger book. It had two columns. One column was a credit. I'd heard of credit cards. And one column said debit. What in the heck is a debit? I had no idea. Engineers don't take any business classes. So I got me a bookkeeping 101 book and I said, hey, that's kind of fascinating, kind of interesting how they do that. And so I knew when I got out of the Navy, I wanted to go get my MBA, which I did at Georgia State. But you had to decide were you going to major in management or real estate or accounting. And by major, they really meant take 4 courses in those particular areas.
Right.
I said, accounting seems like it's like the engineering of the business world. So why don't I lean towards accounting? Because back then, before computers were the big thing, all the consultants out there in business were typically either lawyers or accountants, because that's where you could count the numbers.
Yeah.
And so I did my 2 year stint getting the MBA. At the end of that time, they said, well, Rick, what are you going to do for a living? I said, I don't know. What do you suggest? Why don't you go to work for one of the big eight CPA firms and then check out their clients and ultimately go to work for one of them? I said, well, that's fine, except remember my engineering background. I had no idea what the big eight he was talking about. This was the days of Arthur Andersen, Haskins and Sells, and Ernst and Young. And I do remember at the Academy Award show every year, they have two little dweebs come out on stage that they introduce from Price Waterhouse. I went to work for Price Waterhouse on the basis of that shaky amount of brand recognition. So I was there a couple of years. Back then, you had to actually work for another CPA to get some practical experience for a couple of years, plus pass the CPA exam. And so as I ended my 2 year requirement, I had my wife's college roommate's husband was coming back out of the military and starting a dental practice in Atlanta. And he called me up and says, Rick, I'm going to go work with this big dental supply company in Atlanta here. They do everything. They get your lease, find your location and all that kind of stuff. Sell the equipment, of course, draw up your office plans. They also throw in some free accounting. But I wanted to have you come set up my accounting records. I said, well, I know how to audit General Motors. I don't know anything about that. And he said, well, go talk to the comptroller of this company and get some information and background on what's unique about accounting for dentists and taxes and things like that. So as I was chatting with this gentleman, he was apparently impressed with my candor, and he allowed us how at the end of our meeting together, he said, Rick, we're getting ready to fire this CPA firm we've been using to provide free accounting services. How would you like to set up all of our new dentists every year? So I quickly, after about 3 nanoseconds of due consideration, said, well, yes, sir, I think I could do that.
Yeah.
And I quit Price Waterhouse on the basis of that and was driving all over the state of Georgia, going to all their new dentists and learning more about dentistry than I had in mind. And along the way, discovered that Georgia is the largest state east of the Mississippi. So that's a long way from North Georgia to South Georgia.
Yeah.
And so I kind of became a dental specialist and a dental CPA before that was cool. And about 20 plus years ago, I pulled together a group of 25 CPA firms all over the country that I met with and talked and formed the Academy of Dental CPAs to get other firms that had not 2 or 3 dentists, but hundreds of dentists. And that group now collectively represents probably about 10,000 dentists.
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with them. That's impressive that you were at the start. That's a
Yep.
big nod.
Yep. Yep. And so I had some partners come and go. My daughter was a partner for a number of years with me. I rescued her from graduate school in religion. And I said, now, does that pay well, does it? And she decided maybe it didn't. So she came to work for me and went back to school, got her CPA, etc. And she bought me out about 8 years ago. But one thing that was always unique all along the way was that, the typical CPA, their task is to reduce your overhead and reduce your income taxes. And if they can do that, they're considered to have been, successful.
Right.
But unlike a lot of them, I always wondered, like if you come in with your record showing you had $1 million worth of production or collections that year, I always wondered, where'd that production come from? Could you have had a $1.5 million practice if you paid more attention to the practice management side of things, not stuff that's in the CPA's QuickBooks? And so that always had me lean towards joining some of the Academy of Dental Management Consultants, Speakers Consultant Network, other things where consultants huddle. And they're a lot more fun, by the way, to hang around than a bunch of CPAs. So I started doing practice management consulting, not directly. I don't go into offices and, boots on the ground, but I learned a lot, I should say, about the business side of the running of a practice. And then when my daughter bought me out 8 years ago, I dusted off my electrical engineering degree, came back full circle, and with my business balance and my technical balance, I put together DentaMetrix. And I say it was designed by consultants for consultants, not really for public consumption by the dentists and people like that. In certain cases, sophisticated practice administrators were happy to work with it, but we don't just sell it to anybody who happens to have the money to pay, to buy it.
Yeah, not a retail product.
No, no, this is really professional strength, more like a 3D cone beam X-ray level of evaluation
It
versus
is.
some of the retail programs.
Absolutely.
So the SECAs and the dental intels and the practice by numbers, they're all very nice, but in many cases they're not very transparent as to where their numbers come from. And if you scratch the sizzle, you find there's oftentimes not much stake behind them. So that's why discerning consultants and practice transition advisors like you that really, really need the depth of analysis turns to DentaMetrix.
Um, Regarding prior existing clients, what are some of the most common misunderstandings about business analytics?
Well, a couple of things I've discovered over time. Remember, 80 or 90% of all the dentists, they went to school to become healthcare providers,
Yep.
not bead counters. And so their eyes would always glaze over if we'd lay a profit and loss statement in front of them from
Yeah.
QuickBooks and whatever. And I really quickly realized that they want to know what time it is, but they do not want to know how the watch was made.
That's a good way to
Well,
put it.
if you want to increase the revenues in your practice, which directly impacts the value of your practice, somebody in your office or an outside consultant or a combination of both needs to know down in the weeds, how is the watch made? And that's where DentaMetrix shines and takes all the labor out of gathering together a bunch of data, things like that. Many things that you can't even get a report out of Dentrix or EagleSoft or Open Dental for. And we'll talk about some of those as we go along, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the biggest thing we have to convince people of is 90% of your problem is not overhead. It's patient flow, revenues, proper kinds of patients, patients that align with your philosophy. And I'm not here to tell you what your philosophy should be, whether you want to be an emergency practice, open 24 hours a day, which goodness sakes we need, or Medicaid type of practice, which we need, or way at the other end of the spectrum, you want to be a high-end cosmetic dentist. All those are fine, but you have to make sure the patients you're attracting align with that.
We were mentioning sophisticated buyers. What are some questions that the buyers ask and the metrics that sellers should be aware of?
Well, in many cases, it's sort of like when they first came out with Steve Jobs and the iPhone. He said, we didn't do a focus group to ask, what do you want? Because the guys don't know what they want until I showed them the iPhone, because there was no basis for comparison.
Right.
So they didn't know what they wanted until I told them so. So the same thing with the buyer. He's all excited coming out of school. He or she, of course, these days, or it's been 3 or 4 years, they went to work for a big box store maybe to make some money to pay down their student debt, and they really don't know what they don't know. So they'll take whatever you as a transition advisor lay in front of them, and generally it's just, how was the collections over the past couple of years and how many new patients do they get, and that's about it. But part of our task is that we want to educate not only the seller side, so that, for instance, they don't misquote the number of active patients they have innocently, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them don't know, or how much of their practice involved in PPOs, they don't totally know, things like that. And on the buyer's representation side, when I was teaching dental school at Medical College of Georgia and over at Chapel Hill for many years, I was trying to educate those kids who had no use for obviously accounting and business. They were still trying to get their requirements out of the way. And I knew that. And I told them, you don't have any real interest in this, but when you're ready, call me in 4 or 5 years. And just remember, you heard it here first. Some of these things I'll be trying to tell you, but don't lose sleep over it at the moment.
Yeah.
Is a
And
third of their revenue from implants or ortho. And you don't do that,
that's not reproducible.
right?
Yeah.
And so, or something much more subtle, do they have a big presence in Delta Dental Insurance? And do they historically enjoy the benefits of what they've called their Premier plan, Delta Premier? And people are sadly finding not until the deal closes that, oh, by the way, you can no longer step into the shoes of the Premier guy. You have to go into the PPO, and we show you in DentaMetrix exactly what the impact of that will be, but it's like a 30% cut.
Yeah, and as a representative of sellers, that's a fact that I have to share with the
Yeah,
buyer.
yeah, but a lot of representatives of sellers who don't have the due diligence and the mindset that you have, all they want is a quick transaction, they don't mention that, and you end up with some lawsuits.
Mhm. First from the
That's true.
competition, I was hoping that we could go through a walkthrough of one of the profit leaks reports.
Sure.
You're good to go.
Okay. So we essentially generated about, a 50-page report for folks. But we, again, don't expect them to get all excited about that necessarily. But somebody, management consultant or sophisticated practice administrator, wants that depth of detail. But we do summarize it into a 7 or 8 page report here we call revenue opportunities and profit leaks analysis. And I'm excited that you have the larger mindset of wanting to hopefully catch potential sellers or potential buyers 2 or 3 years before the actual action will take place so that they have time to maybe tidy up and patch up some of the leaks and take advantage of the opportunities that we show off for them if they have any sense at all, because that could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in
Absolutely.
the valuation and deliver more value to the buyer in the process. And so this report would be good for both sides of the equation. So let me buzz through some of the features here. Some are more nerdy than others. And so I divide practice management, at least the quantifiable, into 3 P's. I'm not sure you can see this well, but patients, production, and profit. If you don't have patients, proper patients, you don't get production. And if you don't have production, then you don't get profit. And one of the best things the doctor can do on behalf of his patients is to stay in business. They love you, they trust you, doctor, and they want you to be around. And so you can't just be out there drill, filling, and billing and not pay attention to being successful. And another fourth column could be people. And frankly, that's the stickiest part, the human HR part
Yeah.
of keeping the staff happy, communication skills, things like that, that I can't quantify. So I divided my report into that. And let's look at the patients area first. And here's where I point out that your computer may say that you've got, 3,200 quote patients. Well, that's kind of patients of record, maybe even all the patients who've ever passed through your practice. It could be 10,000. But something doesn't smell right if you try to sell those as active patients to a buyer, and we break those out. And an active patient, we follow the ADA and most other people to say that an active patient is one who's had at least one appointment in the practice in the last 18 months. Well, the fact is that there are a number of good quality patients that don't come in every 18 months necessarily. They're walking the streets out there, and they may only come in every 2 or 3 years. And those are the people here in this 1521 section of red. They're not active compared to the 1700 over here in the green. But maybe we could re-engage with 20 or 10% or whatever percentage point you guys want to put in here. This is a variable, by the way, that the seller can play with to get it more representative with your help, or the buyer can take this home and play with this if they want to be more conservative, less conservative. And I say, if you could re-engage with 10% of those people based on the average revenue per patient, that could be $171,000 of production there without doing any marketing or anything else. And you're doing them a service because a lot of them think, for instance, that when they come in to get a cleaning, all you're doing is scraping their teeth. They don't understand you're doing oral cancer screening and things like that that are vital, or that you're looking for that systemic link between bleeding gums and perhaps heart disease and health in general. So it's much, much more important than just cleaning their teeth. But then we look at the vitality of the active patients. How strong are they at coming in? Because there's 304 patients of his that don't have any future appointment at all. Period. But I don't want to leave you hanging there and say, well, tell me more about that. And here I get into some categories of folks who had, in the last 6 months, perhaps broken an appointment and has not been rescheduled, or they only came in once or twice in 18 months. They're technically active, but they're not like real practice building patients, part of your family where you want to take care of the patient for the rest of their lives and have recare visits and things like that. Or along the same lines, there's 379 patients who are in the recare program. They have a due date in the future, but no appointment. And we'll look at that in a bit. They're kind of in the maybe red area up there, just wandering around in the wilderness, waiting till they feel like coming in for an appointment. And so we talk about that with the vitality of your active patients, and said again, if we could re-engage with 20% of those patients, there's some revenue there to be generated, and again, delivering better service to those patients, right? And this is an example of the detail we give you, where some of the retail programs will stop at the 304 and leave you hanging. And I'm pulling back the curtain a little bit. And there's a negative figure here to take out the fact there's some duplication maybe.
Yeah.
Somebody with no future appointment may also have not been in 18 months, that type of thing. And so we give you the why are the numbers the way they are, and not just throw a number at you. And we don't insult you and go back 20 years for broken appointments. We say, no, this is outstanding within just the last 6 months. They were either wait, will call, or they broke an appointment, or they canceled an appointment, whatever, in the last 6 months. So
it's a good way to drill down.
Practical. Okay, so let's look at new patients in the area of patient flow. Everybody gets excited where we have like 32 new patients. And here I'm showing you an average for this practice, 32 new patients every month. Everybody's high-fiving, that's fantastic, we're excited. Could be 70 new patients. And then you come along and Jared said, wait, but our analysis shows something you guys weren't looking at. That is, you lost 23 patients on average every month out the back door. You only had a net gain of 8 practice building patients, and that's why I call this not new patients, net patients gained and lost.
Net patients, yeah.
That's net patients. And we go one step further and show you graphically how has this looked month by month by month. because a lot of folks are more oriented to pictures, and I have to admit, I won't tell my fellow CPA buddies this, but in spite of 40 years of doing this, I still like pictures better than numbers.
Right?
Because just look how obvious this is,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
the
not just a number. You
changeability.
see it.
And it points out, let's say in May, yeah, you got a bunch of new patients that month, close to 40, 30 or 40, but look how many left out the back door. And think about how much time you, quote, spent with these patients, how much you spent on PPE, COVID HIPAA type supplies with these patients. We need to make sure earlier there's a match more between your philosophy and what is the patient looking for from you. And we get into numbers month by month by month. You'll see this little information symbol here. If you get into the actual Excel file, that's a hot link. You could click on that and immediately get down into the numbers of patients each month, et cetera, et cetera. We actually have two modules of the DentaMetrix. The one that's data heavy, that you and the consultants like at the high level.
Mm-hmm.
We call that the monthly Excel. It is not an Excel program. We call it that though because once a month we pull all the data and put it into Excel.
Okay.
For a buyer or a seller or a practice administrator or a consultant could slice and dice the data even more. They can tell where these numbers are coming from. But in a PDF file, that's not a hot clickable item. So down here, I want to look and see how many of your new patients get enrolled in ReCare. 84%. We had a goal of say 90, maybe 95%. 84% is not bad, but it's not what I would like to see depending upon the kind of practice you have. If you have a typical family general practice where you would like to have patients that align with your philosophy, that you'd like to take care of their teeth and gums, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and bone structure that they don't think of for the rest of their lives. And so new patients, ideally to you, 100% would want to be in the ReCare program so you have a chance to do your job. Sometimes we'll see practices that are down at 62%. We say, is that consistent with the kind of practice you want? 62% or lower would mean you have an awful lot of emergency patients.
Yeah.
And they may say, duh, we're an emergency practice.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it makes sense. Yeah.
So there's not a right or wrong reason or answer here. Just know who you are and is this consistent? But then we also go one step further and say, let's look at the specific people who were new patients 18 months ago and follow them to now. What percent of them are still in the practice? 42%. That's surprisingly not unusual to be low like that.
I was curious. You have a goal of 60%. So I feel like,
right.
Yeah.
Have these people stopped feeling the love, or did they never intend to stick around? That's when you can get involved there and discuss why are these numbers the way they are. Oh, you have an emergency-based practice. Or you have a Medicaid practice where a lot of them, frankly, are pain motivated more so than coming in just to get their teeth cleaned. Okay. So coming down further, let's look at the perio component of ReCare. And we would show you again month by month a lot more detail if you click on this little information link here. But we're essentially telling you that 60% of your ReCare patients, or your active patients rather, 60% are current. They have future due dates. They have future appointments. But remember I said there was 300 and some odd that had a future ReCare date but no appointment to match. And that's this 21%, this lime green over here, that 378 we mentioned.
Yeah.
This is a significant chunk out there kind of wandering around. They're in your ReCare program. The others are in your recare program or have been at least once, but they're delinquent, fortunately less than 12 months, and some are delinquent over 12 months, and there's 7% who never had recare, period. And that's not totally unusual because even a good solid general practice is going to have some emergency patients
Emergencies,
who
yeah.
came in for an episodic one-off type of visit and they never intended to, quote, join your practice or whatever. But when we see this at 30%, we get nervous, and that's why we need you to come in there and figure out why is that like
Yeah.
that. We're going to look at what we call the monthly utilization rate. So if 100 patients have a due date this month, what percent of them have an appointment for that? Now, not necessarily this month. We know life gets in the way, but how about next month or next month? They're getting a little late, but at least they have an appointment. And that's only 82%. Why isn't that 90 or 95%? They have an appointment or a due date. Why aren't they making an appointment? And that's the question you'd ask the doctor. Well, I don't have time for the front desk to make those appointments. Or how about this? I don't have enough chair time. Or I've got the chairs, but I can't get the hygiene time. And so it's not their fault, the doctor's fault. They're trying to make the appointment. They have good communication skills. The patients maybe would love to get in, but I don't have space for them or don't have the hygiene time. And that's where you unpack this and say, well, maybe we should add another operatory in that fifth room you have, the one where you have the Christmas tree and all the decorations and all that stuff. But you told me wise enough, you were years ago wise enough to have that plumbed for a chair. Well, I can't afford a chair. Doc, look how much you're leaving on the table where you can't get your patients in, if that's the reason.
Just that metric right there is important to so many people who have questions of when should I add another hygiene chair.
Right. Or an associate.
Yeah, exactly.
Down here is the monthly pre-appointment rate. Some folks would call that the reappointment rate. And this means last month, looking at the number of patients, 100 patients or whatever, came in for a recare visit and they have a due date in the future, what percent of them made an appointment on the spot? One distinction between this module and the second module, this module being periodic once a month, the second module is actually live. It's not just daily. A lot of the retail programs say that, they are updated every day, which really sort of means like 8 o'clock that night. We're actually updating quietly in the background every 15 minutes. We're virtually
Real
live.
time. Yeah, virtually.
Real time almost.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the distinction is, I've told you, let's say you did get to 95% reappointment, pre-appointment rate. Fantastic, everybody's happy, we'll leave you alone, let's move to the next topic. But a sharp office manager, practice administrator would say, Rick, tell me about the 5% who didn't make a reappointment. Well, it's not the purpose of this high-level report to get into names. There are no names in this report. The live report will, in fact, tell you who left yesterday, last week, whatever time period you want, who left without a reappointment. So, how about perio? A lot of offices are so busy they aren't paying as much attention to perio as they perhaps should. And a lot of consultants would suggest a goal would be that 20, 25, maybe 30% of all the hygiene work that's done should be perio related, especially if you have an aging population that they don't have, toothaches so much anymore, but they have problems with gums and bone loss, things like that. And so look at this office. They're at 2.4%.
I feel like that's
Way too
I feel
low.
like that's a universal average almost. Maybe in
Yes.
between 2 and 5%. At
Yes.
5 being high.
Yep. Yep. And this low percentage for treating perio is one of the fastest growing areas of legal problems in the country.
Okay.
Because another thing we look at is after you do the perio because they had infected gums, not healthy gums, etc., you're not supposed to do a 1110 cleaning because if you look at the definition, that's on healthy tissue.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. You're talking about both sides of your mouth. You told me I needed scaling and root planing because I don't have healthy gum tissue, but now you're doing a 1110. Well, we really do a 4910 equivalent kind of cleaning, but only 37% of the patients who've ever had scaling and root planing have 4910 recorded. We say, well, we really do probably a 4910, but the insurance company won't pay for that. They down code it to a 1110. So we just go ahead and call it a 1110. Oh, so now in addition to supervised neglect, you're committing insurance fraud. Well, I hadn't thought of that. You really should post the 4910. I know
Yeah.
in the real world a lot of folks don't, but you'd better again have good notes. We did the
Yeah.
equivalent of 4910 to keep the bookkeeping easier. We coded that out as a 1110, but we were not negligent. But nobody looks at this percentage figure.
Is that percentage figure specific to that office, or is that
Yeah,
like
oh
a?
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. And unfortunately, that's not an unusual figure.
No, absolutely not. Perio is difficult for everybody.
But that's where you would come in and say, let's talk about this and have the same conversation I just had. Are
Yeah.
you down coding that to 1110? Are you really doing the equivalent of a 49? Oh, yeah. Oh, well, we're probably not doing that. Again, that's the fastest area of lawsuits in the dental profession because you've got enough evidence there to hang yourself in your own charts and x-rays. So this is not optional. This is not optional. You may think all of your units have especially clean water and none of your patients have perio. That's not what the CDC says and the general statistics out there.
And this would be a good time to bring up the fact that this is a professional strength tool, and that you have a network of qualified professionals for specific areas of expertise. So, like, if this is a focus for a practice, then they can come through us for finding the right coach or consultant to address specific concerns.
Right. Yep. All right, so that was the patient side of things. Let's jump over to the production side, and kind of a gray area between the two. We're showing you how much you're averaging per day and per hour worked, and this is all the doctors. If you have two doctors, we combine those together. And average per day is useful for you, and per hour worked is useful for you internally, because you know what your practice, how many chairs you're working out of, how many hours you have in a day, etc. This is very helpful internally, but you can't go to the American Dental Association a survey or go to your study club and compare this to other doctors down the street. Because, again, you may work 10 hours a day. They may work 6. You may work out of 3 chairs. They may work out of 1. You'd better produce more per hour and per day than they do. How about case acceptance? Restorative and operative only. This is something else unique we do. We don't look at anything under $400. I'm only looking at restorative and operative, not hygiene. We'll look at hygiene someplace else, SRP, perio, etc.
Yeah.
But just restorative and operative. And what's the case acceptance there? And we talk about the dollars percent and the number of cases percent. And dollars is almost always lower because you may have some large cases, and if one of them is not accepted, that really hurts your ratio. Whereas based on numbers, 1 crown is 1 case and 1 Invisalign is 1 case. That's just 2 cases.
May
But
I?
we show you. Go ahead.
So in a lot of cases, these numbers could be affected by how the dental teams input the treatment plans, and but I feel like your artificial intelligence um, accounts for that.
Yes, yes. I was startled to find that probably 85% of all the offices do not fully utilize, if at all, their case acceptance
Absolutely.
module in their software.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the retail programs will just say, hey, if you don't use your computer program right, we can't help you in this area.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Or no
Or
garbage.
no garbage. Yeah.
Well, with my 40 plus years as a dental CPA, I knew they didn't use the system properly.
Right.
So we said, let's go to the next step. So before artificial intelligence was a big thing, we had our own sort of artificial intelligence. And what we do, sort of like the 4 month moving window with the how much was produced for the new patient, we go back 4 months ago. So let's say we're in October now, finishing up October. So let's say we go back to July.
Mm-hmm.
We can see what was diagnosed in July. And we'll use that as a proxy for what was presented, which
Yes.
is pretty close. But then we don't care so much about what was the case acceptance yesterday. All the young students with their checklist of looking at software, they want to know, well, can DentaMetrix show me what the case acceptance was yesterday? Yeah, it can. But that's the most useless number in the world. Why do you care about just yesterday? Because, let me give you an example. You got Bubba in the chair. You tell Bubba he needs $10,000 worth of work. What are the odds Bubba's going to shoot straight up in the chair and say, well, heck yes, when can we get started? No, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Bubba's going to take another couple of laps around the Bass Pro Shop, see what that bass boat looks like again. He may go home and look in his checkbook. He may even go home and discuss it with his wife. And sure enough, 2 months later, he makes a decision. Well, what good did that do to focus on yesterday? Yes, we can show you that, but we'll have this conversation to explain that probably isn't as good as what we do instead. Let's go back 4 months ago, see what got diagnosed. We can then see what got appointed, which would be accepted. So we see it was presented in July. Was it appointed in July? If you're lucky, could be, or August, or September, or October. So we give you that 4 month moving window again. And probably 85, 90% of what's going to get accepted gets accepted in that window.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to hit a lick of the snake. You didn't have to officially do anything. We created virtual treatment plans, and we discovered whether they got accepted or if they're still pending. And our second module can give you a list of names, who specifically has outstanding treatment. And we give you a fantastic daily huddle that shows you in the list of patients coming in today or tomorrow or next week, not only who's coming in, but what outstanding treatment do they have? When was the last time they came in for a cleaning? When do they have their last FMX or x-rays? When or how much does the family owe you? Not just them, but the family, how much accounts receivable, and what are their insurance benefits, and when does it renew? All on one piece of paper.
And that's in the web DM, not the
That's
Excel.
in the web DM,
Okay.
the daily.
Yeah.
So it has a daily huddle that can't be beat. And
Okay.
you can see a sample of that and a lot of these other things we're talking about on our website at DentaMetrix.com.
Cool.
DENTA, like dental without the L, DentaMetrix.com, DentaMetrix.com.
I'll make sure to have that in the description and
Okay.
stuff too. Yeah.
While we're here, we're also showing you a fascinating ratio that the late Charles Blair, who was so good at analytics and scheduling and looking at codes and things like that, we said that crown and bridge, non-implant, so we're not counting implant supported crowns, is 251% of large fillings. Let me unpack that. If you did 100 large fillings, not buccal pit amalgams, but fillings that could have been candidates for a crown, 3 surface, 4 surface fillings. For every 100 large fillings you did, this office did 251 crowns. Normal is more like 50 crowns.
Yeah.
And so if you're way down at 20 or 10, it's not up to Jared and I to give you, clinical coaching, but we can just tell you you're way low compared to a typical practice out there. And the 251 is much higher than usual.
So this is definitely a cosmetic practice.
And so is it a cosmetic practice? Or is this guy maybe over-treating? That's where you want to do some chart audits and look and see. So here's your acceptance rate, but over here we go one step deeper and say, oh, by the way, here's the average you're presenting, $2,842, and here's the average accepted. That's pretty darn strong. And you could have an average of, $300. If all you do is buccal pit amalgams, you better get 98% acceptance rate. But what good did that do? Or you may present a lot and only have a $600 average accepted. Does that mean there's a disconnect with your patients of communications? You didn't explain properly the options and the importance of the crown versus the filling and that type of thing? That's where you and Jared could have that conversation. Why are these numbers looking like they're looking? Okay? Here's how much outstanding treatment you have that the WebDM model would show you. How much is out there waiting to be accepted? And again, we don't insult you and look back 20 years. I'm saying let's just look at what was presented within the last 12 months. These folks are still thinking, still hot. And so this is what's outstanding, 547,000. And I said, if you could engage and get 30% acceptance of what's out there, that'd be $184,000. That 164 without having to do marketing or anything else. And again, you can set this number to 20%, 10%, 40%. This is a variable.
Yeah, and any number of getting that is good. I mean,
yep,
it's not scheduled, so.
Right. And here's where the other module would tell you the list by a time period you want to suggest.
Because everything is HIPAA compliant.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything is HIPAA compliant. And if you need to fill your schedule, on that daily huddle, you can check a box and say, show me all the ASAPs, or sooner if possible. Patients who've told you, hey, I've got my high school reunion coming up, and the soonest you could get them in was 30 days from now.
Yeah.
But if there's a cancellation, they're hot to trot. They want to get in tomorrow if they can. So we can give you that list. Or they may be retired, no rush, but they said, hey, I'm open. I got nothing to do. I'm sitting at home playing Scrabble. So if you have a hygiene appointment open up all of a sudden, give me first right of refusal. I'm open. Give me a call. And so we can generate that list for you. And at the same time, when we generate that list, it'll remind you, how much money do they owe you? When does their insurance renew? How much treatment do they have outstanding? When was the last time they came in? So you have a knowledgeable phone call with a person, not just looking to poke somebody into your appointment book. So here's your third leg. This is the profit. And I don't mean profit in the traditional sense that your CPA does, looking at overhead and your QuickBooks and things like that. I mean, how effective were you at realizing and getting to the bottom line your usual and standard fees versus what the impact is of the Delta Dentals of the world and the PPOs on your practice. And so what I'm showing you here in yellow, this says that 31% of your production overhead was insurance write-offs that you left on the table because of being in Delta and people like that. And we point out, this is more than you pay your entire staff. And in fact, this is the largest expense item in your office that doesn't even appear on your CPA's profit and loss statement because it's not in QuickBooks.
Yeah.
But this is real, folks. This is real. And many of you don't know what that number is. You're out there being busy, doing what you can, but you've not paused to look behind the curtain.
Really, it's
And
just a
so
marketing expense at the end of the day.
that's a huge marketing expense.
Yeah.
Yep. We do look at accounts receivable. And one thing we like to point out that many people don't look at is you owe other people the credit balance. People who've made deposits or just have left some account money on hand. And that could be huge. You've got to take care of that and maybe even get involved with the state with unclaimed assets if that number is big enough.
Well,
But
and
most people,
especially for somebody who's going to transition, that number becomes very important.
right? Because you've got this is going to come off the top of your selling price.
Mm.
The young person, you need to know this number's here because that has to reduce the selling price because you're going to have to pay this off if you buy the accounts receivable and take
Potentially.
responsibility for this.
Yeah.
And Jared may arrange it so we don't get accounts receivable involved in the process. Here's a
It's
little
negotiable.
side note that's fascinating from one of the big collection agencies out there. It says, what are the odds of collecting any accounts receivable the longer it is outstanding? If it's over 90 days to 120 days old, there's only a 15%, maybe 50% chance it'll ever be collected.
I'm surprised it's up to 50%.
Yep. And that's why it's important for the office manager to be tracking this if you're not going to, doctor. Coming down a little further, we're telling you more about the PPO write-offs here. So here we have a PPO analyzer that goes into the various plans to show you carrier by carrier how much they're costing you. You've probably not seen this before because you don't have one delta in your office. You've got 127 different deltas. Every employer's plan is different.
Yeah.
We, in fact, with our 3D cone beam, can drill down to the employer plan level if you want to. But at the 50,000 foot view, the pink is what you wrote off compared to what they paid you. And you can see which plan's relative size. And you can, again, with the information up here, drill down to the specific numbers, how many patients you have in each plan, etc. If you were of a mind to perhaps change your relationship with some of these carriers so that you don't participate in the plan. But this is eye-opening to a lot of folks.
This is a very popular slide.
And nobody else, none of the other softwares, the retail folks that I'm aware of, has this, and that's why a lot of consultants come to us for the above points we've been through, and this really specifically.
Yeah.
Especially if you marry this delta, a huge number, many of you, that's the largest carrier in your practice. If you're on Premier and the poor buyer has to knock that down to PPO, this situation only gets worse. And I do a quick fee analysis to show 10 popular fees, how much you compare to what the standards are out there. So then we add up all these green squares and then apply a write-off. You can't net all of that. And here in this practice is $1.1 million of revenue opportunities and or profit leaks. And even if you don't agree with all the points I came up with, what if you could make some changes and recover half of that?
Yeah, just even 20%, even
Yes.
30%. like the power
And
of your
that's
reporting
huge.
is just undeniable.
That's huge.
Yeah.
But this is to a potential buyer
Yeah.
is huge. You're coming in full of vim and vigor, and not to mention the big student loan. You will go do the work that this doctor did when he was younger, going to eat all the rubber chicken at the Rotary meetings and stuff like
Mm.
that, and recover some of this stuff that's here. Face on it. Between the two of us, you'd think we'd grow a little hair.
Well, I got it on my face. I got it on my face. But thank you for going over the reports with us, and also just to go over a little bit of the logistics of how your program works. There's a pretty simple and easy onboarding process.
Right. So we work with Delta, not Delta. We work with Dentrix, EagleSoft, and Open Dental. So that's certainly 85 to 90% of all the main softwares out there.
Yeah.
And so we work with them, and all it requires is about 10 minutes for me to get on your computer. We just get on a workstation. We
Not
do
the
not
server.
have to touch the server.
Mm-hmm.
We don't make your IT guys nervous. It's so simple. I just do a little screen sharing program. I take over control of the mouse. I drive, tell you to take a coffee break, and you can watch if you want to. And we download our little app, like downloading an app for an iPhone almost. It does all the extraction. We ignore all reports. We go straight to the raw data and create our own reports and the results you saw above. And those there are many things that EagleSoft, Dentrix, and Open Dental can't do. They can't produce reports like we did above,
No.
or at least they can't without an awful lot of work or some of the artificial intelligence we made up with the virtual treatment plans and things like that. So it only takes about 10 minutes. That data comes to us, we review it, see if there are any questions we have. In case we're not picking up something properly, maybe you're not coding something properly, we can give you a heads up, or wonder if something doesn't pass the smell test. Then we send it over to Jared, and he does the same thing, and perhaps goes over with you to see if you concur, and your office manager will be smart to have in the room to see if it all passes the smell test.
And I don't think that this should also be intimidating to office managers. It's not pointing out that they did a bad job or anything like that. It's just really going over opportunities that most people don't consider and looking at metrics that most people don't track without tools that are as powerful as yours.
Right.
I think that it'd be a good idea for us to offer a future product to practices that are planning to sell in the next 2 to 5 years. We could perform like a pre-evaluation profit leaks analysis that helps them, plug those leaks in time before they're ready to transition, maximizing their practice value, and leaving their legacy in good hands.
Yep.
And I think maybe in the future too, if we get enough interest, we could go over one with somebody that anonymously that signs up with us. Would be cool to do, I think.
Yeah, we can do a case study.
Yeah. But honestly, thank you.
And or meet with some of the younger potential buyers through some of the young dentist study clubs or alumni associations or whatever, through school or up at Chapel Hill, and show them what's possible to understand with the 3D cone beam analysis, as opposed to what were production last year and how many new patients did you get.
Yeah, especially when they're looking for a place to call home for decades.
Exactly, and biggest investment of their life, probably.
Absolutely. So no, once again, thank you for your time and for doing this with me, because it's just so valuable to me, to doctors, to buying doctors, to selling doctors. I mean, honestly, and consultants that you work with.
And I enjoy teaching all of those and being a coach to all of those.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And if anybody has any questions, Rick, would you like to share, like, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, it's Rick, R-I-C-K, at email will be DentaMetrix.com. Again, DentaMetrix.com. That's the same as our website, or there's an info@DentaMetrix.com link on the website, and be happy to.
And the logo is right over there. It's up in the corner, so they'll see that.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks again, Rick, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Sounds good.
See you.